Hi, everyone. I'm looking forward to seeing you on Friday for our workshop. If you want, you can use this QR code to get to these materials. And in the last video, we talked about installing R, and now we're going to be talking about reading in your first data set. So importing your first data set, there's multiple ways that you can do this, but I'm going to try to go for the most straightforward way so that we don't have to possibly type in something wrong with our path name. So what we're going to do is we're going to define a new variable called my file. And then this less than sign and a minus sign, we call this gets. And then we're going to say file.choose. And then we're going to open our parentheses and close our parentheses. And when we do that, something is going to pop up like a file explorer. And you're going to just click the file that you've downloaded as your example gradebook. Okay, then we're going to say let data get read.csv. So this is a function that says I want to read in a CSV file. And oh, by the way, the name of it is called my file, which we found earlier. And then we're going to look at the first 6 rows of our data set by doing head of data. And then we're going to look at the last 6 rows of our data set by doing tail of data. So if you go to our conference Google Drive that I've shared with you, I've put an example data set. Now, I've only done this in case you don't have your own grade book and would like an example grade book to work on for the conference. However, if you have your own data set, feel free to use that. Okay, if we look at this example data set within Google Sheets, we have a student ID, and this is just a random ID to identify each of the students. We have the term that they took the class. We have the number of units that the class is worth, the department that was offering the course number. We have the grade in course, number grade in course on the 4.0 scale. We have a repeat code to let us know if the students are taking the course for the first time or if they're repeating the course. We have the entry term in which they entered into the university. We have their first generation college student status, which is a 0 if you're a non-first gen college student, and it's a 1 if you are a first generation college student. I personally like to use 1s and 0s versus yes and no in case there's typos. Low income status flag, once again, it's a 0 for non-low income and a 1 for a low income student. The transfer student flag is a 0 for a non-transfer student and a 1 for a transfer student. We have the self-identified sex that the students provided at the time of admissions. And then I created a flag called female, which is 0 for any category besides female and a 1 for females. And we have peer status, which is students who are Black, African American, Latino, Latina, Chicano, Native Hawaiian, or Indigenous to the US. We have the actual ethnicity that was self-identified by the student. Next, we have their college code, which refers to what actual college they are at the university. We have their major code, which is their specific major within the college. We have the quarter GPA for the term that they were enrolled. So in this case, we're looking at fall 2023. We have the quarter units that they were taking that same term. We have their cumulative GPA as of that term and their cumulative units. What is this? Okay, we had a small visitor come to join us, and he's now in the other room. Sorry about that. Okay, we have the admissions college code. So this is at the time of admissions, what college did the student apply to? We have their admissions major code, and that's at the time of admissions, what major were they? So in some cases, these match, and in some cases, they don't. When they do match, that means that the term they're taking the class, they are the same major as what they were at the time of admissions. And if they don't match, that means that they've switched majors. Okay, so we have their admissions major's name, we have their high school code, we have their high school name, their high school graduation date. For some of the students, it's popping up. NA just means not applicable, so that means we don't have data on that particular student. We have their previous school GPA. Some of these are high school GPAs, so you can see that they're above 4.0. We have the admissions units, so that means how many units did they come into the university with. That could be from AP classes, or it could also be from external units, from community college classes or dual enrollment classes that they took prior to joining the university. We have their best converted SAT math, reading and writing scores, and you can see that this is missing for so many students, and that's because in the UC we no longer require the students to take those tests, and so many students actually don't report those test scores anymore. We have their midterm 1 scores, midterm 2 scores, final exam scores, and then we have a lot of gradebook data to the right that corresponds with this particular course. So this instructor had multiple homework assignments, they had lecture video quizzes, they had lecture assignments, and I believe that's the end of that grade book. Now, don't worry if your data set doesn't look exactly like this from your grade book. To be able to make your grade book useful, all you need to have is a student ID, the midterm 1, midterm 2 final exam scores, and any other information that's helpful from your grade book. But I also wanted to give you a bit more of a comprehensive data set in case you wanted to be able to practice some more skills. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our Google Drive and I'm going to download this data set. Download. And it downloaded as a Excel file, which I actually didn't want to do. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to try this again. And the default is to download as Excel, but instead I want to download it as a CSV. That's just going to make my life a little easier when we're doing the code. All right. So I'm going to open up RStudio next. Here we go. And this is a comment. That's just nice to know that if you want to put any notes to yourself, then you can put a hashtag or a pound sign in front of the line, and then R will ignore it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my file gets file.choose parentheses. Okay, and when I do this, if I triple click on the line, it'll highlight the entire line. If you don't like to triple click, you can just drag and comment that out. And what I can do is I can right click, and that's not going to help me in RStudio, so I apologize. I am going to either click run the current liner selection. So I just hovered over this to say run the current liner selection. And if you notice, it says Control Enter. So if I want to use the hotkeys, then I can just press Control Enter. When I'm coding, I always use hotkeys. When people are new, sometimes they like the push button a little better. I find it to be faster and more efficient to use the hotkeys. If you're on a Mac, it's not going to say Control Enter. It's going to use the Command Enter to run the liner selection. So just be aware that, once again, I'm working on a PC, so there are slight differences between the Mac and PC version. Okay, so if I triple click this line, and I like to use the hotkeys, so I'm going to press Control Enter. And what's going to happen here at the bottom of my screen, oh my goodness, I notice, and it's kind of hard to notice, but it is flashing at me, that there was an editor opened up on my computer. And if I go back to where I saved my files, which I believe was in my downloads. So I'm going to go to downloads, and then I see this example data set CSV, and I'm going to make sure, whoops, sorry about that. I'm going to make sure to select the CSV, not the Excel workbook, because this is the exact file that I want. Now, if you notice in my environment, now it tells you, hey, you have something in your environment available to you. It's called my file, and it's really just this file path. So if I write in the script, what is my file? and I run this down in the command line. So I'm going to press Control Enter again, or you can click this Run Current Line or Selection. And when I run that, you'll notice that it gave me this huge, long file name. Now, the reason that I like to start with this file.choose is because I have a really long extension here, which would be hard to type out. And for whatever reason with Google Drive, it gave me a .csv. And I may have not written that correctly if I had to just memorize this whole path. But really, this is your file path. So I could say my file path gets this whole information. And I could have just told R from the beginning, what is my file path equal to? And this is a little redundant at this point, but now whether I had done the file.choose function to let R know where my file is saved, or if I typed out that whole long mess doing file path, I actually get the same exact thing. So you'll notice that now I have two values in my environment. One is called my file, one is called file path. It doesn't matter which one I use, and we're just doing this for redundancy to say, oh, if I don't prefer to use the file.choose function and I would like to type everything out for my file name, this is how I would do it. Now, just one of the practices that I use is that if I ever do the file.choose, then I will figure out what the file path is and save it into my script. So the next time I don't have to click through. So if I'm reopening the project, then I could just start with this file path section and not have to do this file.choose section. So I'm going to do what I usually do when I code. And if I did a file.choose, I'm going to just comment it out. So the next time that I code, I will have the entire string of the file name or the file path saved. So now let's get to reading in the data set into R. Data gets read.csv file path, right? And if I look at the first 6 rows of my data or the last 6 rows of my data, I'm going to find out what everything looks like. So I'm going to triple click this line. I'm going to press Control Enter, Apple Enter if you're on a Mac. And now notice we have something else and it looks slightly different. It says, hey, by the way, in your environment, you have a data set. It has 108 observations with 81 variables. That means I have 108 students and I have 81 variables describing those students. Okay, so now this is used as a data set within R, and I can look at the first 6 rows of the data set, and that's going to give me 81 variables, but just the first 6 rows of those 81 variables. So it's a lot of information to start. But if I scroll all the way up, this is very similar to what we saw before. And if we do the tail of the data set, that's saying, give me the last 6 rows of my data set. So it's always good to look at the top and the bottom of your data set just to make sure that nothing weird happened when you read your data into R. So when I look at this, I see that everything is looking really great. We have a student ID. We have all of these things. Now, let's suppose that you made some changes to your data set. You might export that data set. And instead of using read.csv, you could just say write.csv. And then you could write your data set. And just to be a little faster, I'm going to take the beginning of my file path, which had the location of my download section, and I'm going to put new file, yay, .csv. And if I do that, I have write.csv. What am I writing? I'm writing my data set, comma, my file. This is all looking good, but I want you to be able to see the whole thing, comma, I don't want any row names, so I'm going to say row names equals false. So let me just move this over so we can see the whole thing. Write.csv. What am I writing? I'm writing my data set. Where am I writing it to? I'm writing it to a file called new file yay.csv, and my row names equals false, and that's because I don't need the numbers that are on the left here. Okay, so when I run just this last line, remember, you can press run liner selection. You can press Command Enter if you're on a Mac. You can press Control Enter if you're on a PC. And when I do that, I can go to my File Explorer and I can see that I have a new file called newfile.yay, and I could open that in Excel. So that is really useful if you want to be able to make some manipulations in R or combine some data and then write out a file. So I hope that you were able to follow this and be able to get at least one data set into R before we start on Friday. If you have any trouble or questions, just send me an email and hopefully we can get you on track. Or you can rewatch this video in the slower speed, pause, stop, rewind. But other than that, I really look forward to seeing you on Friday. Bye.